Good morning, Yaakov. All right. Okay, Chevre, here we go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Pesachim Daf Chavtes. We learned a three-way machloikas Tanoim regarding Chametz, Lifnei Zmanoi, during Pesach, and La'achar Zmanoi. Let's focus now on La'achar Zmanoi, meaning after Pesach. Chametz, She'avar Olav Pesach. You have the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that holds that one may not consume Chametz She'avar Olav Pesach, mashma, whether it belonged to a Yid over Pesach, whether it belonged to a Goy over Pesach, with the penalty of a lav, not Kodesh, but a lav. We have the sheet of Rab Shimon that holds that Chametz She'avar Olav Pesach, even if it belonged to a Yid, the words of Rab Shimon is that you're not Oived V'loi Klum. And then you have the sheet of Rabbi Yossi Haglili that holds that even during Pesach, the Isur of Chametz is only Ba'achila, and Chametz is not Asur B'hana. And as the Gemara built all that up to lead to the question that we left off yesterday, that we learned in the Mishnah Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph, the Mishnah tells us regarding Chametz She'avar Olav Pesach, there is a difference between whether it belonged to a Nachri, that the Mishnah says is Muter B'hana. And as we explained, it also means Muter B'achila. If it belongs to a Yid, says the Mishnah, then it is Asur B'hana. And the question is, who does the Mishnah follow? It cannot follow Rabbi Yehuda, because again, mashma from Rabbi Yehuda that does not differentiate even chametz that belongs to a goy, she'avar olav Pesach is asur b'lav, ba'achila and ba'hana. So it's not Rabbi Yehuda. Can't be Rab Shimon, because according to Rab Shimon, chametz shel Yisrael after Pesach, the words of Rab Shimon is you're not over anything. Can't be Rabbi Yossi Haglili, because even during Pesach it's muter b'hana. The Mishnah is speaking about an Isur of Anah after Pesach. So that was the question. We're going to have two approaches today on Daf Chavtes. We're going to have one approach that the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. The other approach will allow us will explain how the Mishnah follows Rab Shimon. Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov, who is the one that explains how the Mishnah can be reconciled with Rabbi Yehuda, has an unbelievable chiddush over here. And he says that chametz that belongs to a goy, guys, listen to this, may be eaten by a Yid on Pesach, obviously if the ingredients are kosher. That the whole Isser of Chametz is only when the Chametz belongs to a Yid. Chametz that belongs to a Goy is muter, according to the way Rashi learns, in Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is muter, ba'achila on Pesach. Wow, we're going to read the Tosfos. Tosfos says Rav Acha doesn't mean ba'achila, he only means ba'hana. But even that is a huge chiddush of Rav Acha. Then we're going to learn how the Gemara is going to prove that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov retracted this unbelievable chiddush. He retracted his position. And how do we know that he retracted his position? Because we're going to learn a Braisa. The Braisa speaks about someone who eats chametz that belongs to Hegdish because someone was magdish their loaf of bread on Pesach. God forbid. But then the Braisa is dealing about the question, not about whether you chayiv kodesh, which you are for eating the chametz b'Pesach, but the Braisa is speaking about me'ilah, whether you're moil, whether you're not going to be chayiv for me'ilah. And we're going to have 5 different ways of understanding what is this machloikas all about, why you would be chayiv, why you would not be chayiv. And one of the 5 explanations is from Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov, and that explanation that he gives only works if he retracted his opinion, which indeed he does. So whatever he was machadish, b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda, he later retracts on Daf Chavtes Amud Beis. We're going to begin an unbelievable sugya of mixtures containing chametz in it. And this is really the broader discussion regarding bittul nullification. In other words, when you have something that's prohibited, food that falls into permitted food. So then, is it batal, is it not batal, will depend on a few things. First of all, is it min b'minoi, or is it min b'she'enoi minoi? Did it fall into something that is like it, Like it, by the way, can mean like it in flavor. Like it can mean in name. We're going to follow our sugya that min b'mina refers to the same flavor. We're going to refer back to our machloikas tanoim we had in the Nachas Chav Beis. The shitas Rabbi Yehuda is min b'mina is never batal. We had that shit of Rabbi Yehuda many other times as well. Shit of the Chachamim is min b'mina is batal b'roiv. Midrabanan it's batal b'shishim. So we're going to also learn about the concept of nois and tam and parting favor. There's also the issue of, is it lach balach, is it yavish b'yavish? Obviously, when we speak about a mixture, we're speaking about something that becomes indistinguishable. Because if you can distinguish that which is prohibited, you take it out. But even in that which is indistinguishable, yavish b'yavish can mean that every piece is distinct because it's all dry and dry, but you don't know which one is the permitted one, which one is the prohibited one. Then there's lach balach, where they become completely mixed in together. In other words, not only is it not distinguishable, but it's not distinct. All of these will play into the discussion, and we're going to learn the three shitas that we'll have on the Chavtes Amud Beis, and that will continue into Daf Lamed. So wow, so we're going to have an unbelievable Daf. We're up to Daf Chavtes Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amud. Again, what are we focusing on? The Gemara wants to know, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? Not Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Shimon, not Rabbi Yossi Hagalili. That's where we left off. Answers the Gemara. Answer number 1. Our Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah differentiated between a Nachri and a Yisrael. And again, we are going with the presumption that the Tana Rabbi Yehuda makes no such difference. Says Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov, listen, that the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, Yalef So'or da Achila, Miso'or D'Riyam, he derives the prohibition of consuming So'or. So'or here means chametz. From the prohibition of Bal Yeira, not owning, not seeing chametz in your possession. He makes such a link. What do we gain by making such a link? Zogt Rabbi Acham, that Masor Diriyah, as we learned in the Brais and Daf Yomid Beis, when the Torah says V'lo Yeroa Lecha Shel Cha'i Ataroya Aval Ataroya Shel, remember, Shel Nachri V'Shel Hegdish Shel Cha'i Ataroya Aval Ataroya Shel Achedim. We explained in Daf Yomid Beis Achedim means a goy, and V'Shel Gavoya. In other words, that if a Yid has in his home chametz that does not belong to him, it belongs either to a goy or lahabel to hegdish, he's not violating bal yirah. Let's focus now on the goy, and the same will be by hegdish, as we'll see soon in our sugya. So when he makes this comparison, so af so'or da'achila, guys, don't fall off your seats. The prohibition of consuming so'or means all types of chametz. You know what you may not eat on Pesach? Yours, mine, meaning chametz that belongs to a Jew may not be consumed over Pesach. Mamma mia. Listen to the words. You are, according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rav Acha, you are allowed to eat chametz that belongs to a guy. Now, obviously, if it's not kosher, you got a kashrus issue, but you don't have a chametz issue. Eating chametz that belongs to hegdish, oy gevalt, you're stealing from a hegdish. We'll learn later whether you chayv me'ilah. Why would you not be chayv me'ilah? We'll explain later. But taking that aside, you're not chayiv for chametz. Wow. So therefore, says the Gemara, says Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, ubedinu, really, the iboya leila misna v'afila b'chilanami shari. We spoke this out when we learned the Mishnah yesterday. So when the Mishnah says that chametz shel nachri she'avar olav Pesach muter b'hana'ah, really, it should have been muter b'achila. Why did we use the word hana'ah? Because va'ayda the Tanach Yisrael asur b'hana'ah, since the second part of the Mishnah, speaking about chametz she'avar olav Pesach that belongs to a yid. There, it's not only asur b'achila, but the Mishnah says it's asur b'hana'ah. That's needed to be stated. That's the bigger chiddush. So just for the sake of symmetry, taninami denachri muter b'hana'ah. But really, from a goy, it's muter b'achila, and more than that. According to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, the Mishnah could have said that chametz shel nachri is muter b'achila toich Pesach. Again, the bigger chiddush of the sefer of the Mishnah regarding chametz she'avar olav Pesach, that even la'achar zmanoi is also b'hanon, that needed to be mentioned. You want to say that even la'achar zmanoi. So again, for the sake of symmetry, taminami denachri la'achar zmanoi. But really, the Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda, And the words of the Gemara is that Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov is saying that since he makes the comparison from the Isur Achilo to the Isur of Bal Yirah, just like by Bal Yirah, everyone agrees that there's no violation of Bal Yirah if the chametz does not belong to you, if it belongs to a goy. So there's no prohibition to eat chametz, that belongs to a goy. A yid could eat chametz that belongs to a goy on Pesach and not violate anything midoraisa. Now, look inside indeed the fourth Rashi, the fourth line of Rashi from the top of the in the middle of Rashi, that he says clearly, he's saying what it says in the Gemara, that umuter chemtzoi shal nachri af ba'achilo va'afilu b'pesach min ha'toyra. In other words, what Rashi is implying is that the Rabbanon, you may not do that. Who remembers this if not for learning the Gemara? Such a shita obviously is not brought down anywhere. In Shulchan Aruch, as we'll see in a moment, that Rav Acha himself changed his mind. Now, there's a problem over here. The problem here is a technical problem. At least that's the way we learned the Tosfos. Technical problem is that if I'm going to take chametz that belongs to a goy, God forbid, and eat it, at one point it's going to belong to me. And then it's a Jew's chametz. And then I'm going to be violating the Isra of eating chametz on Pesach. Look inside Tosfos. Ubedin, the top Tosfos. Bedino da filo toichs manei muter. So Perush Rashi, like we just read, that mamish, it means the way it says, that muter bachila. Says Tosfos, not can't be that. Because for kasha, the efsher, it's going to become yours while you're eating it. If the guy gave it to you, then he gave it to you. Then it's hareu shaloi. And even if a Jew is eating the chametz of a nachri without the nachri's gifting, in other words, he's a ganef, he is stealing it from the guy. Okay, the moment he steals it, the moment he takes it, he's chayiv ba'achrayis, meaning that if it's be'en, that's dinim that we'll learn later regarding in the zikin. If Reuven steals something from Shimon, if that item is the way it used to be, that item still belongs to Shimon. But the moment anything happens to it, then he has to compensate Shimon. And what did we learn also above? That the moment a yid is chayiv and achrayis, as far as Pesach is concerned, it's as if it's his. So the moment he's chayiv achrayis, in other words, Tosfos is saying that even according to this shita right now, can mean that a yid can actually eat chametz of a goy on Pesach because technically it will automatically belong to the yid. And therefore the Riva, just quoting a few lines down in the Tosfos, says that what he really means is it's muter bahana. Theoretically it's muter bachila if it belongs to the goy, but practically it's going to become owned by the yid, but muter bahana. At least that answers the whole Gemara. Muter bahana. The Mishnah is speaking about hana. Even on Pesach, it's muter bahana. Now, how that fits in the Gemara when the Gemara speaks about muter bachila? Okay, that's the issue that we have to address. When God willing, when we'll come back to yeshiva, and how the Achronim explain Shitas Rashi that there is a hechatimsa, there's a possibility. There got to be a possibility because the question of Tosfos is simply a technical. That someone takes chametz, the guy will take it and he'll put it down the Jew's throat. And there's certain scenarios where he did not take possession of it yet. He's not yet chayiv b'achrayis. It's already considered at this moment that he consumed it. It's theoretically or Rashi practically, there's going to be a time that a yid can eat chametz of a guy on Pesach and not violate chametz b'Pesach min ha'Torah. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, Rabbi Amar, our Mishnah follows Rab Shimon. And what was the kasha that we had on Rab Shimon? That Rab Shimon says clearly that not only a goy chametz she'avar all of Pesach la'achar zmanoi, you're not over v'loy klum, zakt Rab Shimon. There's no violation. The Mishnah says that it's asur b'hana. So the Gemara answers, yeah, nechanami. And that was, by the way, that was the Rashi we read in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is Rab Shimon, but Rab Shimon knasa konis midoraisa you violated v'loy klum. But let's understand something. How do you have chametz she'avar all of Pesach? How do you own it? You owned it over Pesach. Chametz she'avar all of Pesach. So you violated during Pesach bal yirah bal yamatzah. Rab Shimon holds that after Pesach you can even eat it. But since you violated by owning the chametz, so the Chachamim gave you a knas. Hoyil va'avar aleh bal yirah bal yamatzah. So the Chazal said midrabanan. Not only you can't eat it, but you can't even have hana. That was mamish the Rashi that we read in the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says, "Shenemar v'lo yirah l'cha sa'or," So we read that Rashi, that's Rava. Now, why Rashi picks Rava, we'll see in a moment. We spoke it out in our intro. Because the answer of Rav Achar bar Yaakov cannot stand because he himself retracted his position b'shitas Rebbe Yehuda. Okay. Before we get to the retraction, now the Gemara wants to work something out. Bishloima says the Gemara l'Rava. Hainu diktani shal Yisrael asur, and the last words in the Mishnah koyach is mishum shenemer v'lo yeirah. That explains it. Since you violated lo yeirah during Pesach, therefore there's a knas. But according to Rav Achar bar Yaakov, right? Mishum lo yeyachol chametz mi bayalei faker. Rav Achar bar Yaakov, like we learned yesterday, b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda. How does Rabbi Yehuda know that there's b'chlal and isur on chametz she'avar all of our Pesach? So we learned yesterday because the Torah wrote 3 times you cannot eat chametz, right? Lo yeyachol chametz. So one of them was before Pesach. Before Pesach means from the 7th hour. One is during Pesach. One is after Pesach. So when you're trying to explain the isur, you should quote the pasuk from where Rabbi Yehuda learns the isur, which is the isur of eating chametz. Has nothing to do with lo yirah lacha. So it's stimmt nicht. So answers the Gemara, no, it works. Because me, Savrat, why do you think that the Shenemar is going on the Sefer? The Sefer is where the Mishnah wrote that Shel Yisrael is Asur Bahano. No, it's not, says the Gemara. The Shenemar is going on the Reisha. Now it fits beautifully. Because when the Mishnah writes that chametz that belongs to a Nachri, La'achara Pesach is Mutar Bahano, how do we know that? We know that from Taka this pasuk, V'lo Yirah L'chasoir, as we just explained. What's the whole reason why we exclude Chemtzei Shel Nachri, Afilu B'Pesach, L'Rashi, even from the Isur Achila, is because we compare it to Lo Yirah L'chasoir. V'achi Ka'amar. Why is it mutarana? Mishum shenemar v'lo yirah l'cha, which from where we learned b'negei isur bal yirah, and bal yirah no one debates. Shalcha iyat teroya, avol ateroya shalachem shal gevoya. And then what the Mishnah wants us to understand is that, like Rav Achar bar Yaakov is saying right now, is that we do compare the isur achila to the isur of bal yirah. The yalef so'or da'achila, the isur of eating so'or. So'or here doesn't only mean so'or, it means any type of chametz. Mi so'or d're'iyah. And therefore, there's really a heter achila during Pesach. And as the Gemara said above, the emes, the Mishnah could have written, Chemtzei shel nachri muter b'achila b'Pesach. The Mishnah wrote, Hana'ah, and after Pesach, all for the chiddush of Shal Yisrael is asur, not only on Pesach, but after Pesach, and not only b'achila, but even asur b'ana, la'achar Pesach, kishitas Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rav Achar bar Yaakov. Furthermore, says the Gemara, and now you know va'azdu Rav Achar bar Yaakov and Rava, they go l'shitos sayu va'azdu l'tamayu. The itmar, it says clearly, this is the itmar, a statement from Amiroim. Ha'oichel so'or shel nachri she'avar olav Pesach. So here, unlike our Mishnah that only spoke about Hana, at least here we're speaking about eating. L'divrei Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi, according to what will Rabbi Yehuda hold? Rabbi says you chayiv malchus. Why would you not be chayiv malchus? Right? That's the law. We learned 3 psukim. One of them goes for la'achar zmanoi. Rav Achar bar Yaakov Amar ein loike gewaldig. Rav Amar loike, because Rav doesn't subscribe to the limud of Rav Achar bar Yaakov. Lo yalef Rabbi Yehuda so'or da'achil mas'or d're'iyah. No one is debating that Bal Yirah does not go to Chemtzei Shel Acherim nor Shel Gevoya. No one debates that. But according to Rava, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make such a link between the Isur of Bal Yirah and the Isur of eating. But Rav Achar bar Yaakov, that's his shita, before he retracted, Omar, he holds that Rabbi Yehuda holds, Ein Oloika. There's a law not to eat chametz regarding chametz she'avar olav Pesach, because Yalav So'or Da'achila, Mi So'or D're'iyah. Okay, so now we have the first piece of the daf today. So we reconcile. The Mishnah can either go like Rabbi Yehuda, or it can go like the Tanach Rab Shimon. But we have this huge chiddush, especially like Rashi, that's saying that a Yid can eat chametz b'Pesach and not violate midoraisa anything if it belongs to a goy or if it belongs to Hegdish. Okay, now we're going to see that v'hadar bei. Says the Gemara, you should know that the Hadar Bei Rav Achar bar Yaakov Mahahi. This unbelievable chiddush is something that he retracted. Now, why did he retract? The Gemara is not going to say. which also would mean that he would now have to agree with Rava. Once you retract this position, then the only way to learn our Mishnah is the way Rava explained that the Mishnah goes according to Rab Shimon, which is why Rashi in the Mishnah brings the sheet of Rava, because at the end it's the only explanation. Now when the Mishnah says that Shel Yisrael, you're not allowed to have Hana'ah from Chametz over all of Pesach, that's a Knas, that's a Isur Midrabanan. Now how do we know that he retracted? So now we're going to learn a Moira de Kabraisa. It's beautiful, this. And it's very easy to follow. The Tanya. If a person, there's chametz of hegdish. Now, don't forget the Beis Hamikdash, like we mentioned, in the Avodah, there was barely any chametz by the Korban Toida, some of the breads, and by the Shavuos. But it was very common that when people donate their things for the Bedek Habayis, people would donate whatever they own. So it happened often that a person can have in their house, they can have food, and they can be magdashit, belongs to hegdish already, okay? And it can be in their homes. I'm just giving them a practical hechatim, how this happened. And a yid, God forbid, on Pesach, ate up that chametz. Now, we're not addressing now the isur of kadas. We're not addressing the isur achila. We're not addressing that now. We want to know the din of me'ilah. Now, guys, let's remember the dinim of me'ilah. The dinim of me'ilah is that when a person consumes, when a person is moil, something that has no monetary value, we're not saying that they're allowed to do it. It belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. But if there is no monetary value, then there's no me'ilah at all. L'cha'ira, chametz on Pesach has no value at all, because there's not only an isur achila, there's an isur hana'ah, okay? Which would mean l'cha'ura that there should not be me'ilah. However, here there's a machlekes tanoim. One opinion says, the first Tana in this Braisa says, yeah, moyal. The yesh oimrim that loy mo'al. Now we'll have to understand what is under this machlekes. And as we mentioned, we're going to have 5 different approaches. Beautiful. The Rashi, have a count 14 lines from the top of the Amid. He lays out the whole thing. Once you have this, you'll have the whole thing. Says Rashi, mo'al. Mo'al is chayiv karba me'ilah. And by the way, it's not only karba me'ilah. When a person has to bring a karba me'ilah, really what you have to do is you have to pay back the value of what you took. That's called a keren. There's a knas of adding a halachic fifth, a chaimish, and then a karban hasham me'ilos. Okay, and as we'll see in a moment, wherever you won't have to pay back the money, then there's never going to be a chiyuv to bring the karban. Zok Rashi, why will the first Tana hold that mo'al, the kosavar chametz the hegdish bepesach bar damimum? It has value. Now, does it have value right now? No, it doesn't have value right now. But let's just speak out the words that we have so many times of davar hagoyrim lamamin kamamin dami, which has various applications. Here it would mean if you would not focus on right now, does this have value? Wait until after Pesach. According to Rab Shimon, we learned chametz she'avar olav Pesach, even from a yid, midoiraisa has value, right? We learned the Mishnah, there's a knas, but I'm saying it's something that has value. So therefore, if you would not have consumed it, then after Pesach, the hegdish would be able to sell it. Hold on, didn't we say, at least we just said that even according to Rab Shimon, midrabanan, there's a knas. Why is there a knas? Rab Shimon said, because you violated bal yirah bal yamatzah. There is no isur bal yirah bal yamatzah on chametz that belongs to Gavaya, that we just learned. Everyone is moide, lo yirah l'cha so'ir. But shall Gavaya yes roya, which means according to Rab Shimon, chametz that belongs to hegdish, she'avar all of Pesach, is mutter for everything, which means it has a value. Does it have value on Pesach? No, but it's going to have value after Pesach. So if someone ate it up on Pesach, let's continue with Rashi. But after they hegdish kid Rab Shimon. So you were already giving the first explanation that the reason why the Tana holds ma'al, because this Tana is following the shita of Rab Shimon, and on Pesach, Rab Shimon, it has no value, but davar hagoyrim lamamin kamamin dami, it will have value after Pesach. The Amar chametz la'achar Pesach muter. The afla gavs like Rashi the knas kanis. So says Rashi hanimila bechamsa shel hedyet, because the hedyet was even about yirah. Avol hai the behetera shehi agabei. But like we learned above on the family base, avol atoroya shel acherim shel gavoya achar Pesach have a mizabin legizber Yisrael. After Pesach, the kabayis representative would be able to sell it, and a Yid would be able to eat it. So when you eat it up on Pesach, you are taking away something of value from the Beis HaMikdash. That would be the reason why you're Moya. Let's keep on reading in Rashi. We're already reading the first explanation. Okay, good. So why would the Yesh Oiminim Loy Ma'al, says Rashi, Kedem Afarish? Like the Gemara, the first approach we'll have right now, which is a whole new din, guys. Kam Leib the Rabba Minei. The Hoyel V'nes Chayiv Kares. Bishum Achila, since eating chametz on Pesach, is an Isur Kares, and the same act which was Machayiv you Kares should have been Machayiv you the part of, we're speaking the payment of Me'ilah, Pater Menat Shlumin, because of the rule of Rabbi Nechunya. Now that's a chiddush. Now guys, everyone subscribes to Kamlei Midrabba Minei, which is what we learned in Ksubis, Vaidish and Spatza. But here, the Kamlei Midrabba Minei is normally said wherever a person does something for which to chayiv a greater penalty in Beis Din. Like for example, if a person, God forbid, on Shabbos burns down his fellow's house. So he was Machalal Shabbos by fire, by burning, and then he destroyed his house. Since he's Chayiv Skila, he's Pater Menat Shlumin. If a person eats chametz on Pesach, there's no chiyuv in Beis Din of Skila, but you're Chayiv Kares. Rabbi Nechunya holds that the rule of Kam Leibid and Alaminei is also said when you're Chayiv Kares. So you're Pater from Tashlumin because of Kam Leibid and Alaminei. Let's keep on reading in Rashi. Ubamakim she'ein keren, ein choimish ve'ein me'ilah. That's a klal by me'ilos. That when you chayiv hasham me'ilos, when you chayiv the keren, so that automatically you have to add the halachic choimish and you have to bring a carbon. Wherever there's no chiyuv keren for whatever reason, then you're not going to be chayiv hasham me'ilos. So the first approach is that this braisa of both shitos is following Rab Shimon, which explains why you're ma'al, because Davar HaGoyim kamam and dami. But this first Tana holds Kam Leimid Rabba Minei only when there's two penalties, both of which normally would come about in a human court. So if you chayiv skila, you're pater menat tashlumin. But when you chayiv kares, you're not pater menat tashlumin. The second opinion holds that we apply Kam Leimid Rabba Minei even when there's only a chiyuv kares. And therefore, you're not chayiv to pay the keren, and therefore it automatically doesn't beautiful. That's the first explanation. We have 4 more to go, but we have time for all of it. Let's read it back inside. Okay. So, man, it's by the little star over here. Man yesh oimrim. So the Gemara doesn't even explain the first sheet. We read that out on Rashi. It's Rab Shimon, and by the way, the yesh oimrim, according to this, is also Rab Shimon. But man yesh oimrim, Amram Yechlen, Rab Nechunya ben Akonahi. The Tanya Rab Nechunya ben Akonahi oises Yom Kippurim ki Shabbos litashlumin. Same concept. If a person, God forbid, on Yom Kippur burnt his fellow's house down, on Yom Kippur there's a chiyuv kares for the malachis, not a chiyuv skila. Same thing. He says that Ma Shabbos, if a person does one act, it's about one act, that act itself is violating 2 different violations. And if you're Maschayev ben Nafshay on Shabbos, the graver one on Shabbos is skila, everyone subscribes to Yechayev skila, Pater Menat Shlumin, because of this rule of Kam Leimid Rabba Minei, says Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, Af Yom Kippurim, even though you're not chayiv in a Beis Din, but yes, Maschayev ben Nafshay through Kares, so we also say Kam Leimid Rabba Minei. And the same thing will be over here. Beautiful approach number 2. Chevre Rabbi Yosef Amar. Rabbi Yosef holds, I'm reading around 11 lines before the end of the narrow lines, before we read inside the Gemara. This adds everything. Rashi is the teacher. Says Rabbi Yosef, I disagree with the first answer the Gemara gave. Because if both Tanaim would hold like Rab Shimon, the Amar Toich Zmanei Asr Bahana, the Kul Alma Moida the Pater from Me'ilah. Why? Because on Pesach, Rab Shimon, Chametz is Asr Bachila, Chametz is Asr Bahana. Asr Bahana means it has no value. We said that many times already. If something is mine, but if I cannot even derive benefit, its words garnished. So, Hoyel Vahashta Mi'olei Chazi, V'lav Memoinahu. Notice that Rabbi Yosef doesn't hold that Davar HaGoyim L'mamin like this is commandment. So what? But the case of the Braisa was someone ate chametz of Hegdish on Pesach. Period. So first of all, no one is following Rab Shimon. Must be because of that, says Rashi, in understanding what Rabbi Yosef is adding, that Aliyah the Rabbi Yosef Aglili pligi. Guys, let's go back to the three options we have. We started yesterday. What does Rabbi Yosef Aglili hold? Rabbi Yosef Aglili holds that chametz b'chlal is never aser b'hana, which gives it value. Oh, the Omar toich zmani nami shari b'hana. Beautiful. So now, avada you're chayiv me'ila. Why would you not be chayiv me'ila? Right? You're muter b'hana. Problem is, my friends, this chametz is hegdish. So for you to be able to have hana, what do you have to do? You have to redeem it. But when you're going to redeem it on Pesach, the one who's going to purchase it, right? They're not allowed to eat it. It's Pesach. So they're going to do, what are they going to do with the chametz? The example is they'll redeem it from hegdish to feed it to a dog. Is one allowed to be played the hegdish when it won't be eaten by a yid? Is that a bezoyan for the hegdish? That's the machloikas. That's if you hold that you can be played the hegdish to feed it to the dogs. So therefore, being that both of these Tanoim subscribe to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, therefore it has value because it could be sold on Pesach. So the person is chayiv me'ila. If you hold that even though it's muter b'hana, but it's hegdish, and since a yid cannot eat it, so it's going to be given to someone else, not a yid. The example here will be it's going to be redeemed to give it to a dog. That you can't do that. If you can't do that, right now it has no value. If it has no value, there's no me'ila. Let's keep on reading Rashi inside. And therefore, no one subscribes to Rav Nechunya. No one says Kam lemidei Rav Minei over here, according to Rav Yosef, because there's no chiyuv skila for God forbid eating chametz on Pesach. So the only question is, does it have value? Or does it not have value, contingent on that argument regarding kachim? Now,
when you say they don't hold like Nechunya ben Akana, they're just saying that Nechunya ben Akana would not apply his din in our case of chametz and on Pesach, right?
Nechunya ben Akana is the machadesh that we say kam lemidei Rabbi Minei, even when it's kares and tashlumin. But all the other Tanoim don't subscribe to that. Don't subscribe to that. There's kam lemidei Rabbi Minei when there's skila. Okay, whether you're loikin or mishalman, that's another machlokes we had in Ksubas. But charis and tashlumim, other than Rav Nechunya, no one agrees. This kam lemidei, you chayiv charis and you chayiv tashlumim. Gavaldik. Another thing, just to know that this question about being played to kachim, lachilim leklavim, is really a machlokes by kache, by items that have kedushas haguf. And we will learn this more in kachim. Many items that have kedushas haguf b'chlal cannot be redeemed. The chiddush here is, but then there are times that something had kedusha saguf and it could be redeemed. That has greater kedusha. There, it's more problematic to be played it lachilim leklavim. What Rabbi Yosef is saying over here is that even something that only has kedushas bedek habayis, which is the example that we gave. I have bread in my home, and before Pesach I was magdish it. I just didn't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash yet. The gizber is going to sell it when he gets it. That never had kedusha saguf. Still, there are those that say, you can be played the hegdish lachilim leklavim. It's not respectful. Let's read it inside the Gemara now. Rabbi Yosef Amar, right, 5 or 6 lines from the bottom of the Amid. The played him like you have to add that. The Baraisa goes according to Rabbi Yosef Aglili. And the played him as hakachim lachilim leklavim komifligi. Man the Amar Ma'al. Why? Because Kusavan played him as hakachim lachilim leklavim. And therefore, since we're going to let Rabbi Yosef Aglili that on Pesach a yid can have hana midoirai. You can have hana. So you can sell it, and the yid can buy it, and they can feed it to their dogs. So when you ate it, you stole money from Hegdish. Chayv me'ila. Man Amar Loimal, he holds that Enechanami, you're allowed to have hana from chametz, but don't forget this is Hegdish. There's nothing you can do with this on Pesach. Very good. And therefore, Ein Poidim, fight it. Next, answer number 3, approach number 3, all to explain the machlokes in the Braisa. Ravacha bar Rava, not by Yaakov. Ravacha bar Rava, Tani Lo, Chevadaf Chav Testament base, Lahash Maitza. In the name of Rabbi Yosef, Bahai Lishna, another way. What's the other way? That the Lekula Alma Ein Kacha Ein Paidamasai Kacha Machlivim Leklavim. Let's read right over. Say Rashi. Rashi is the one that's filling in all the gaps over here. Note, who are we following? Look inside the top line. The Lekula Alma Ein Paidim Va'aliva de Rab Shimon or the Pligi. No. Rabbi Yosef didn't say that this is following Rabbi Yosef Aglili. No, we're going back to Rab Shimon. Why does Rab Shimon hold, my friends? On Pesach, Aser Bachila, Aser Bana. Rab Shimon holds that biblically, la'achar Pesach, even for a yid, biblically, you can eat and have hana. Right? The Shalei la'achar Pesach, af lachilas Yisrael. So ubaha pligi man amar ma'al savar afal gab da hashta lechazi hoyel ulekame goyrim lamamenu, because after Pesach ain't plugim lachilim leklavim. So what? Sell it to a yid. The yid can eat it. So that is the machlokes. Whether we say davar hagoyrim kamamin damin. Gavaldik. Let's read it inside. Like the third line from the top. Vachi kamifligi but davar hagoyrim kamamin damin. Man amar ma'al. You know why? Again, everyone is following Rab Shimon because Kasava Davar Hagoyim Lamamin Kamamin Dami. Umanda Amalei Mal, because he holds Davar Hagoyim Lamamin right now is not considered Mamin. And like we learned at Rashi in the beginning of the Sugya, which is good to remember this cloud, that when is one Chayiv Hashama Elois, when you're Chayiv the Keren and therefore the Chayivish. If you're not Chayiv the Keren, for whatever reason, then there's no other Dinei Me'ila at all. Beautiful. Now we're learning the fourth approach. And this approach is from Rav Acha bar Yaakov, and as we'll see clear, that Rav Acha bar Yaakov for sure retracted his understanding b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar the Kula Alma Davar Hagoyrim L'Mamin Kamamin Dami. Very good. And therefore, if you would be allowed to sell this chametz after Pesach, then even though on Pesach it's Asur B'Achila and Asur B'Nor has value, you misused something of value. You're chayiv me'ila. So why would one opinion say that there's no me'ila? What was the machlekes we learned yesterday? Let's put aside Rabbi Yossi Aglili. What's the status of chametz la'achar zmanim? What does Rabbi Yehuda hold? Rabbi Yehuda hold there are three psukim. All of them speak about not eating. We already learned above that not eating includes not having hana'ah. The Braisa also we learned yesterday says clearly that whenever there's an isur achila, there is an isur hana'ah. Rabbi Yehuda holds there's an isur hana'ah also after Pesach. Push it. So it's always going to be asur b'hana'ah. Let's read it inside. Man amar loy ma'al ke Rabbi Yehuda. It has no worth even after Pesach. It doesn't help me. Davar hagoyrim kamamin dami. There's never going to be a time that you can sell it. It's always asur b'achila and always asur b'hana'ah. Now the question is obvious. Now the Gemara says, hold on. What did Rav Acha bar Yaakov say? He says that Rabbi Yehuda holds that we are makish the isur of consumption to the isur of bal yirah. Everyone agrees that bal yirah v'lo yirah lecha. Aval ataroya shalachedem, which means from a goy, and v'shal gavaya. Doesn't make sense. If Rav Acha bar Yaakov would still stand with the shita that according to Rabbi Yehuda, chametz that belongs to hegdish, like to the goy lahavdu, is not included in the isur achila at all. Not even on Pesach, not after Pesach. So his answer doesn't work. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Huda Ahmed Rabbi Yehuda Yalav Sor Dachil Mesor Deriyah. So even on Pesach, it's permitted theoretically to eat it. And even if you go with places, you can have hana from it, aside of the issue of me'ilah. We're not talking, but it doesn't work.
So there's no ger mama in there's value right now. That's
value right there. Atazai. So the fact, it's simple. The fact that he gave that answer, it must be, now this was such a big chiddush, that Avada, it's clear, Ella Hadarbe. Now we're not saying why he changed his mind, but just let's close up our sugya to appreciate Rashi in the Mishnah. So the only answer we have for the question we left off yesterday was, who is the Tan of our Mishnah? L'kula alma Rab Shimon. And the isur of having hana from chametz of a yid la'achar Pesach is the Rabbanon Aknas. But let's finish now this braisa. So we learned so far 4, and now we're going to learn the final approach. We already learned all of the underlying ingredients. Now we're just putting it together in a different way. Rav Ashi Yomar. The lakula alma ein poiden. Number 1. In other words, something that belongs to hegdish, you may not redeem it to feed it to the dogs. Everyone holds, according to Rav Ashi in this braisa, laf kamamin dami. So hold on. So how does it have value on Pesach? And Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that a yid can have hana on Pesach. So, for example, if there's chametz and a yid wants to cook food, a yid is allowed to use chametz as fuel. Just giving you an example. That's not called poidem liklavim. If you're redeeming it to a yid who's going to make use of it, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, a yid is allowed to purchase it. Hold on, guys. How can a yid purchase chametz on Pesach If a Yid is not allowed to own it. Now, when it belongs to Hegdish, there's no Isur of Bal Yirah. But if I'm going to buy it off Hegdish, am I not violating right away Bal Yirah? The answer is no. If I am buying off Hegdish Chametz in order for me to burn it as fuel, that's not Bal Yirah. So therefore, Hegdish could have sold it to a Yid on Pesach. It has value. Has value? Chayv Me'ilah. And the other Shito, Manda Amar Leimal, they hold not like Rabbi Yossi Haglili. They hold like, can be side Rabbi Yehuda, side of Shimon, that what? That on Pesach, you may not have Hana. After Pesach, Rabashi says, I don't care. Let's hold that everyone is subscribing Davar HaGreidim Kamamin is Lav Kamamin Dami, Gavaldik. Okay, so now what the good is that we explained the Mishnah follows Rab Shimon, and we also came to an understanding that the Chiddush of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov he himself retracted that comparison, and no, a Yid may not eat chametz that belongs to a guy on Pesach min HaTorah. He's chayev, God forbid, kares. Okay, and now we are starting the new sugya from today's daf. 2 dots. The whole theme of bittul is, like we mentioned, it's a theme that's not only related to Pesach. It's a shas sugya, right? Bittul, and like we spoke out, we have to know a few klalim over here, and min b'minoi, min b'she'ein leminoi. What difference will it make whether the prohibited fell in the permitted that is like it, that is similar to it, or whether it's dissimilar to it? So let's go about at least 2 nakudas just to chazar over. There is a concept of roiv, bittul b'roiv, achrei rabim lahatois. And then there's a concept of you needing to be mevatel the taste. Now, whether tam ke'ikir is midoraisa or midarabanan, all of that is debated. We don't need to have all this information to appreciate the sugya. But let's just always remember that whenever we speak about bittul of mixtures, of something prohibited falling into something permitted, when it becomes, this is important, indistinguishable, if it's distinguishable, take it out. No one is going to say that it's batul when you can discern, when you can recognize the davar ha'aseh. But when you don't know which part of it is okay, which part of it is not okay. So then there is the food itself. Then there is a flavor that it might impart. And if it imparts flavor, you got yourself a problem. Chazal estimated that you need to have the ratio of 6D to 1, not 59 to 1, 6D to 1 to be mevatel the tam of that one. And then we have the machloikas, which is big, tanoi, manochas chavbeis, and it's brought on in many other places. What happens if min b'minoi, let's go the meaning of min b'minoi, similar and similar, also a machloikas. Remember, is min b'minoi b'shem, or is it b'tam? Let's go our sugya with taste, same flavor. Now, if something, meat, one meat is, the animal turned out to be treifa, the other animal turned out not to be treifa. They have the same tam. If one meat falls into the other, there are 2 opposite ways of looking at it. One way is that it can never become batel because it's imparting its flavor. Now, what's going to be mevatel the flavor? If you have 60 times more of something else, it's going to nullify that taste. But if there's something else has the same flavor, so it's not nullifying the flavor of the non-kosher. So the flavor is always going to be there. That's one way of that shitas Rabbi Yehuda. That midoy raisa min b'minoi can never become bottled. There's a roiv, yeah, but there's a tam issue. The chachamim say punt fakert. They say that when min falls into minoi, you know what you need? In fact, it's not imparting flavor to begin with, because the other kosher food already has that flavor. Doesn't need the flavor from the other. There is no imparting of flavor. So you revert back to the rule of batal b'roiv. Forget about 60 to 1. Even l'chachamim midrabanan, you have to have 60 to 1. The ratio of 60 to 1. Because if you're going to be mevatel that b'roiv, then maybe when something falls min b'she'ein amino, you're also going to go back to bittul b'roiv, and there you have to have a bittul b'shisha. Okay, now let's go here to chametz. Chametz that falls, let's speak about on Pesach, it falls into something that's not chametz. Says the Gemara. 2 dots. Amarav. Chametz bismanoi. Bismanoi means, guys, during the time where there's an Isur Kodesh. On Pesach, Chametz falls into something that's permitted, so prohibited, be'isur kares. Chametz falls into permitted, says Rav, bein b'minoi, whether it got mixed into another food that is of its type, its kind, bein shaloi b'minoi, says Rav, asur, meaning the mixture is never going to be mevatel the chametz. It will always be prohibited. We're going to learn details in a moment. However, shaloi b'zmanoi, shaloi b'zmani means chametz she'avar olav Pesach. Right after Pesach, chametz that she'avar olav Pesach, and we learned there is no chiyuv kares then, right? But you can't eat it. It fell into something permitted. Here says Rav, it depends. Bim minoi aser. Shaloi b'minoi muter, and nekuda. Now we have to clarify the ikar thing that we're looking for is how much of chametz fell into the other, whether it was minoi or she'ein b'minoi. B'mayaskinon ilema b'noisen tam. In other words, that there was relatively a larger amount of chametz. Right, the chametz has sufficient concentration to impart flavor to the mixture. There isn't the ratio of 60-1. If that is the case, we learned in our Mishnah and Daf Chav Ches that chametz she'avar olav Pesach shel Yisrael is asur b'hanoah. So shaloi b'zmanoi, shaloi b'minoi, muter. If the ratio isn't for there to be a nullification of the taste, hoyav tama. That's for sure not the case of Rav. Case is, and we're going to stay with that. Don't worry, we're not going back and forth with this. That Rav was referring to a mashu. A mashu means a mashu. Point of the mashu is that the chametz is not enough to impart flavor in whatever it fell into. Okay, it's not strong enough to be nois and tam. So now let's understand what Rav is paskening. So chametz bismanoi, chametz on Pesach, not when there's an isur achila midoraisa, which can begin with Rabbi Yehuda from the 7th hour. We're speaking about when there's an isur kares that is on Pesach. Then says Rav, bein b'minoi, bein shaloi b'minoi, even though it's not nice and tam, it's going to be yaser. Why does Rav say that? Rav Latame, because the Rav Ushmuel, the Amri Tarvayu, they subscribe to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda that we mentioned. That min b'minoi is never bottled. That kol yisurim Shabbat Torah, it's not only related to chametz. Min b'minoi b'masho. It will never become bottled. It's only when it's b'shaloi minoi that there is where we say that if it's nice and tam, it's usher, but if it's no longer nice and tam, then it will become bottled. So therefore, Rav, since we're speaking about chametz on Pesach, now what is unique about chametz on Pesach, guys? 2 klalim. We have to remember that to appreciate Rav. Number 1, unique is that there's an isur kares, chametz b'Pesach. Number 2, unique, the loy badal minei. Because of these 2 unique stringencies that we are afraid that people can eat chametz because the loy badal minei, and if God forbid one eats it, you're chayiv kares. So Rav made a gzeira here. Rav gazar chametz bizmanoi shaloi b'minoi atu b'minoi. First of all, Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Min b'minoi is never bottle. But if it falls on shaloi b'minoi, theoretically, then if it fell into a ratio where it's 60-1, 60 of heter against the chametz or more, shaloi b'minoi, it's not being nice and tam, it should become bottle. But if Rav would allow you to eat it, then someone might say, "Oh, if min b'minoi, if the minoi kosher also is the ratio of 60-1, but min b'minoi is never bottle enough." So since min b'minoi is never bottle, only on Pesach, because Pesach is unique, because not only first of all there's an isur kares, unlike most other isurei achila, and number 2, like chaylev is also a kares, but chaylev is never muter. But the loy bottle minei, so here we're machmir more. That explains it up. Now, shaloi bizmanoi.
What's the loy badol minei? What does that mean? I'm sorry.
Being that during the year people are allowed to eat chametz, so therefore there's a possibility that inadvertently they might eat chametz on Pesach. So it's the loy badol minei for the first place, right? Explaining why if you did bittul, why do you have to do bedika? Because you might come to eat it. Because we gotta make an extra fence around the chametz. L'Rav min b'minoi is not batal midoraisa. Min b'minoi is never batal. Min b'shaloi b'minoi should be batal on Pesach gezeira. But because there's kares and the loy badal. Now that explains the next statement of Rav. Shaloi b'zmanoi. That means that the chametz she'avar olav Pesach after Pesach fell into something else. What did we, now that was always, everyone here is speaking about the chametz is b'mashu. No, it's the ratio, the davar hamuter is 60 to 1 or more. B'minoi asur. Why b'minoi asur? Doesn't make a difference. Rav subscribes to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds min b'minoi is not batal. Period. Okay. And the Rabbi Yehuda, by the way, means something else. Rabbi Yehuda here means, first of all, it's based on Rabbi Yehuda, but this is another Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda that we learned about in yesterday's share. Rabbi Yehuda holds that chametz she'avar olav Pesach is asur b'achila midoiraisa, right? Because the Torah writes 3 times don't eat chametz. One goes for la'achar zmanoi, so it's asur midoiraisa. Min b'minoi is not batal. Shaloi b'minoi muter, because that's the rule. Why don't we make a gzeira? Because there's no isur kares here. The shaloi b'zmanoi. The shaloi b'zmanoi, ushaloi b'minoi, atu minoi kula hayloi gozrinon, because there's no kares. In order for Rav to make that gezerah, it has to be, first of all, chametz. Now, chametz la'achar zman is also deloi badal minei. I know that. But you have to have both criteriums to be machmer to make the gezerah. Deloi badal and kares. La'achar zmanoi, even l'Rabbi Yehuda, that says chametz she'avar ha'pesach is also mida oiraisa, there's no isur kares. Good. Now we got everything else. Everything else becomes simple. We can have 2 more sheets.
Rabbi,
yes,
just to clarify, normally when you talk about min b'minoi versus min she'ena b'minoi, wouldn't you normally say that the chances of it being batal are higher if it's in its own kind than the opposite? But it seems like Rav is saying...
That's the machlokes. The Chachamim say exactly what you're saying. You're saying what the Chachamim say. The Chachamim hold min b'minoi is batal b'roif. Let's go weiter. Let's read weiter.
Okay, so Rav is saying... according to his
based on Rav and Shmuel's, Bechlal, they agree with Rabbi Yehuda. So it's not unique to chametz. That's anything. Anything min b'minoi is never going to be batal. The chiddush here is that chametz on Pesach. Kares. Rav says, you know what? That even min b'she'ena minoi, it will never become batal. Gezerah. Weiter. Shmuel Amar. Same thing. Same 2 cases. And by the way, we're not going to change anything. We're speaking about a mashu. That's not going to change. Chametz bismani, which means chametz on Pesach, on the time that there's an isur kares, got mixed into something that's permitted. It depends, Shmuel. B'minoi asur, we already know why, because Rav and Shmuel subscribe to Rabbi Yehuda and Menachos. Shaloi b'minoi muter. We already explained all that, because we're speaking about a mashu. So mashu, that the rule, the Torah rule is that if there's a mixture, if forget about the Rav, if it's not even noisam tam, then it's batal. And shaloi b'zmanoi, this is Shmuel. If chametz shaloi b'zmanoi falls into a kosher food, bein b'minoi, bein shaloi b'minoi muter. Now, why would Shmuel say that b'minoi muter? The Gemara explains. Chametz b'zmanoi, says the Gemara, b'minoi asur Shmuel l'taimi, like we just learned that Rav Shmuel damar tarvayu kol yisum shavat Torah b'minoi masur b'mashu. No bittul. Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Shaloi b'minoi on Pesach b'noisam tam. Pashut. How and Shmuel doesn't agree with Rav. We don't make gezeiras. Shaloi b'minam atam minam le'gazam. Clause number 2 of Shmuel. Shaloi b'zmanoi bein b'minam bein shaloi b'minam mutarim. The question is why? Hold on. I get it. If it falls shaloi b'minoi, it should become batal. But Shmuel holds min b'minoi is not batal. Why would the chametz she'avar ala Pesach always become batal? Because here Shmuel holds like Rab Shimon. What does Rab Shimon hold? Rab Shimon holds that chametz she'avar ala Pesach, even of a yid, even of middo eiraisa, is not problematic. It's muter b'achila, it's muter b'ana, it's muter. Now Rab Shimon does hold that it's asur midrabanan as a knas. And the Gemara is going to ask, we'll learn that tomorrow. Hold on, you can hold like Rab Shimon. But since it's asur midrabanan, and Shmuel holds min b'minoi is not batal, so why wouldn't it create a rabbinic prohibition? The Gemara is going to ask that. We'll learn that on Daf Lamed. But at least appreciate that midda oiraisa b'chlal is not a problem. Lit up Shimon. Shmuel de facto says that chametz that gets Pesach that gets mixed into anything, right? We're speaking about a mashu. That chametz will become batal. Next, the third opinion. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, chametz bismanoi, chametz on this man isur of kares during Pesach, that falls into a kosher mixture. We're speaking again all about a mashu. It's consistent. Bein b'minoi, bein shaloi b'minoi, says Rabbi, it depends. Asur b'noisen tam. If it's noisen tam, If it's less than 60 to 1, it's asur. If it's more than that, we'll speak it out. It's going to be okay. Shaloi bizmanoi. I'm sorry. Even benois and tam, even if the ratio is 60 to 1, it's always going to be asur. Shaloi bizmanoi, bein beminam. Bein shaloi beminam will always be permitted. Let's explain now. Shitas Rabbi Yechanan explains the Gemara. Chametz bizmanoi, bein beminoi, bein shaloi beminoi, benois and tam. Because Rabbi Yechanan Latame, the Rabbi Yechanan and Ishlakish, unlike Rav and Shmuel, they don't accept the Rabbi Yehuda in Menachos. They follow the sheet of the Chachamim that holds that Kol Isurim Shabbat Torah, Bein Beminam, Bein Shaloi Beminam, Benois and Tam. So there is a bittul. So he said good. In other words, if Chametz, when it's 60 to 1, it's okay.
So there's never a problem with mashu.
Yeah, min b'minoi really is batal l'roiv. Midrabanan, min b'minoi also needs nice and tam. But when it's nice and tam, in other words, if the ratio of the davar hamuter is 60 to 1, it's batal. And Rabbi Yechanan says that then we will apply here on Pesach. Now, shaloi bizmanoi, bein b'minoi, bein shaloi b'minoi. We will always say that it's mutter. Why? Why will it always be mutter? Because Rabbi Yechanan, like Shmuel, holds like Rab Shimon that chametz she'avar olav Pesach bechlal midoiraisa is not a problem. So there's no problem here. Again, the Gemara is going to ask, hold on, there's no problem midoiraisa. But Rab Shimon, as the Mishnah we established today, follows Rab Shimon, does hold that chametz she'avar olav Pesach midrabanan is also there's a knas. So here again, if there's a knas, so there's a rabbinic prohibition. We don't say that if a rabbinic prohibition got mixed into anything else, it's automatically okay. So we'll deal with that again tomorrow. Isn't
that a knas on a knas, like a gzeira of a gzeira? Because
no. If something is asur midrabanan, how do you get rid of that isur? You have to be mevatel it. So
but it was mevatel on Pesach. Are we talking about a mashu or we're talking about not a mashu?
We're talking about both ways. We're saying both ways over here.
I'm just saying, I don't see why you would say make a knas when if on Pesach, it's not really usher. It's just whatever, it's
No. Rabbi Yechanan, I'm saying, Danny, Rabbi Yechanan is saying that if it's nois and tam, it's still going to be mutter. It's not a mashu. If it imparts flavor, then on Pesach it's a problem. If it doesn't impart flavor, then on Pesach it's not a problem. And after Pesach, even if it's imparting bad flavor, it's still going to be mutter. Because like with Rab Shimon, we have to explain that. I get it. According to Rab Shimon, there's no Yisur D'Oraisa, but there's Yisur D'Rabbanan, and that's the Shvi Shitas. God willing, a lot more from this to be continued tomorrow. Wow. That was
good. Rabbi, just now, this opinion of Rabbi Yechanan,
yes.
Did he make a distinction between min b'minoi versus min she'ein b'minoi?
No, I'll tell you why it doesn't make a distinction. Because since Rabbi Yechanan holds like the Chachamim, the Chachamim hold that min b'minoi is actually lenient. But midrabanan, you have to also have the ratio of nois and tam.
Okay, but
so it ends up being the same. So it ends up Shitas Chachamim will be the same, even though that in this mixture it's not adding flavor, but you need to have the ratio. You need to have the ratio of 60 to 1. So what he's basically saying is again that on Pesach, if chametz falls into something else, if the ratio is 60 to 1, it's going to be mavatalit. Ben b'minoi, ben shaloi b'minoi.
But midaraisa, it would be mavatalit just beroiv.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But
that's correct.
So midaraisa, you have 49% chametz, it's mevatel. Okay,
right.
Midrabanan, you need 60 to 1.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing. And then he's saying la'achar Pesach, you don't need 60 to 1. It's always batel. And even by she'ein aminoi. Okay, to be continued, guys.
Yeah, Rabbi.